The waiting hall of Aurora Lux Medical Clinic reflected wealth in every direction. Polished marble stretched beneath soft leather seating, and tall glass walls allowed warm daylight to settle gently across the room. Everything was calm, orderly, controlled. Adrian Vale sat upright in his tailored suit, reviewing messages on his phone while his fiancé attended her consultation down the corridor. This place was designed to reassure powerful people that nothing was beyond fixing. Yet in that quiet moment, with calm music humming faintly above, Adrian had no idea his entire life was about to collide with a truth money could never correct. Adrian lifted his eyes from the screen only because movement caught his attention. Across the waiting area, the doors slid open quietly, and a woman stepped inside with two young girls at her sides. At first he barely registered them. Parents and children came and went all morning, but something about the girls caused his focus to linger longer than intended. They walked in small, synchronized steps, their hands wrapped around the woman's fingers. One skipped lightly, humming to herself. The other scanned the room with curious eyes. Adrian's breath tightened without warning. Their faces. It wasn't just resemblance, it was precision. The shape of their brows, the spacing of their eyes, the gentle curve of their mouths. Even the way one tilted her head slightly as she looked around mirrored a habit he'd had since childhood. His heart began to pound. The girls looked like reflections pulled straight from his past, not vaguely familiar, not coincidental, exact. A chill traveled through his chest as realization struggled to form. He had seen that face thousands of times, staring back at him every morning in mirrors, old photographs, childhood videos his mother once kept. These were not strangers. They were echoes, and as the seconds passed, the feeling that something was terribly wrong tightened its grip. One of the girls laughed suddenly, a soft, careless giggle that bounced gently through the quiet room. Adrian barely heard it. His attention remained fixed on their faces, his thoughts racing faster than he could control. The other girl turned slowly. Her eyes met his. For a brief moment, neither of them looked away. She studied him openly, not with fear, not with curiosity alone, but with the natural recognition children sometimes have when something feels familiar even if they don't understand why. Her head tilted slightly to the side, mirroring his posture without intention. She tugged at the woman's sleeve.
Mom, that man looks like us.
The words struck harder than any blow. Conversation nearby faded into nothing. The air seemed to thin as if the room itself had paused. Adrian's chest locked, refusing breath. His pulse thundered in his ears. The woman froze. Her shoulders stiffened. Slowly, almost reluctantly, she followed the direction of her daughter's gaze. When her eyes met Adrian's, the color drained from her face. Time stretched between them, heavy, unbearable, because Adrian knew her, and she knew him. Adrian's fingers loosened before he realized they had gone numb. The device slid from his grip, striking the marble floor with a sharp sound that echoed far louder than it should have. A few heads turned briefly, then returned to their screens and conversations. No one else understood what that sound meant. For Adrian, it marked the moment his control vanished. He stared downward, unable to move, unable to bend and retrieve it. His hands trembled at his sides. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came. The world he had carefully structured, meetings, schedules, forecasts, collapsed into noise. His gaze lifted again. The girls stood closer now, still holding their mother's hands. One leaned against her leg. The other watched him with quiet curiosity, as if waiting for him to explain something neither of them yet had language for. His heartbeat grew violent. He wanted to speak. He couldn't, because deep within him a truth had begun forming. Slow, heavy, undeniable. Nothing in his life had prepared him for this. The room seemed to empty of sound, not completely silent. People still spoke, footsteps still passed, but none of it reached Adrian. Everything beyond the space between himself and the woman across from him faded into distance. His chest tightened as understanding settled in layers. Shock came first, sharp, and cold, then disbelief, then a wave of emotion so heavy it left him rooted in place. He searched her face for confirmation he already feared was there. She avoided his eyes. That alone told him everything. Her jaw tightened, lips pressed thin as though holding back words she had buried for years. One hand clenched slightly around her daughter's fingers. The other rested protectively at her side. Adrian swallowed hard. His mind raced through years of absence. Unanswered questions, quiet nights, choices made without knowing what they had cost. The silence between them carried more weight than any argument ever could. Across the room, a nurse called a name. No one moved. Because in that moment, two lives separated long ago had collided again, not with anger, not with accusation, but with a truth too large to ignore. In one instant, everything Adrian had built lost its meaning. The awards, the headlines, the company valuations, none of it mattered anymore. Years spent climbing higher than anyone had imagined could not protect him from the single truth standing across the room. He had conquered markets. He had mastered numbers. Yet he had failed to notice the most important chapter of his own life unfolding without him. Success had promised freedom, comfort, admiration. But standing there, staring at two children who carried his face, Adrian realized how fragile that promise truly was. Because wealth could purchase privacy, power could shape influence, but neither could replace time, and time, once missed, never returned. This was the cost no balance sheet revealed. This was the moment triumph shattered quietly, without noise or warning. Welcome back, and if this is your first time here, welcome to Billionaire Tales by Owen, the channel where extraordinary success often hides extraordinary sacrifice. Here, we tell stories about powerful people, life-changing decisions, and the moments that redefine everything they thought they understood about wealth, love, and purpose. These are not just stories of money. They are stories of consequence, stories that reveal what ambition can give and what it can quietly take away. So settle in, because what you're about to witness isn't measured in profits or prestige, but in the choices that shape who we become when the spotlight fades. Before this story continues, take a moment to subscribe to the channel. If you're drawn to powerful narratives filled with emotion, hard choices, and meaningful life lessons, you'll find many more stories like this waiting for you here. New episodes explore ambition, relationships, family, and the moments that change lives forever, all told through unforgettable storytelling. Turn on notifications so you don't miss the next tale, because some stories aren't just meant to be heard once. They stay with you long after the final moment. What would you do if your past suddenly stood in front of you, not as a memory, but as living proof of everything you never knew? Adrian had spent years believing he left love behind for ambition, that sacrifices were temporary and rewards permanent. Yet in a single glance, he realized some choices don't disappear with time. They wait. Many people chase success believing they can return for what they lost later. A relationship, a family, a moment that felt inconvenient at the time. But life doesn't always pause while we build our future. Sometimes it moves forward without us. And when it does, the cost isn't measured in money, it's measured in absence. Because now the question was unavoidable. How does a man who controls a global company confront the one thing he never planned for? Fatherhood he didn't know existed. How do you measure achievement when it stands face to face with responsibility? Adrian had spent his life choosing growth over presence, believing stability could come later. But standing in that clinic, he was forced to confront a truth many discover too late: success can build a future, yet still erase a family. The moment demanded an answer. Would he walk away again, protected by wealth and distance? Or would he finally face the life that had continued without him? And more importantly, what price would this truth demand from everyone involved? Because the twins standing before Adrian were not coincidence. They were the result of a truth buried years earlier, a pregnancy he never knew about, a decision made in silence, and a life built without his presence. Behind those young faces lay sleepless nights, quiet sacrifices, and a woman who had carried love and fear alone, while he chased a future he believed would eventually make everything right. In the hours that followed, Adrian would learn how close he came to never knowing his children existed. He would discover why the woman he once loved disappeared without explanation. And he would be forced to confront how ambition, timing, and distance can alter lives forever. But to understand how fate led them back to the same room after so many years, we must return to the beginning, to a small cafe, to a man with nothing but a dream, and to the woman who believed in him before the world ever did. Adrian Vale was a name spoken with quiet admiration in business circles. At 38, he had reached a level most people never touched in a lifetime. His presence alone carried authority, not because he demanded attention, but because success followed him everywhere. He moved with calm precision, dressed sharply, spoke carefully, and rarely wasted words. People described him as disciplined, visionary, and impossibly focused. From the outside, Adrian appeared complete. He had built his identity around control of time, numbers, negotiations, and outcomes. Every decision was deliberate, every risk calculated. The man who once struggled to afford rent now commanded rooms filled with investors and executives twice his age. Yet beneath the confidence and reputation lived someone far more complicated, a man shaped not only by ambition but by years of choosing progress over connection and momentum over stillness. Vale Dynamics began as a fragile idea scribbled into worn notebooks and tested on outdated laptops. Adrian built the company during nights fueled by caffeine and stubborn belief. What started in a cramped rented garage slowly transformed into a technology firm known for innovation and efficiency. He wasn't born into advantage. Every milestone came from relentless effort. As founder and chief executive, Adrian oversaw every stage of growth. He recruited engineers personally, reviewed early product failures himself, and refused shortcuts that sacrificed quality. When competitors chased speed, he chose stability. Over time, Vale Dynamics expanded beyond national borders. Its software systems supported logistics, finance, and data infrastructure for corporations worldwide. Governments partnered with them, analysts tracked them. The company was not simply profitable, it became essential. And at the center of it all stood Adrian, the architect of a machine that never slept, demanded constant attention, and quietly consumed his life. With growth came money beyond imagination. Adrian's personal worth climbed steadily until numbers lost meaning. His accounts expanded faster than he could track, and properties appeared in cities he rarely visited. Private travel replaced commercial flights. Security teams replaced privacy. Convenience replaced simplicity. Vale Dynamics was now valued in the hundreds of millions, with projections that reached even higher. Industry summits requested his presence months ahead. International leaders sought his opinion on technology strategy. His signature alone could move markets. Luxury surrounded him effortlessly. Yet wealth arrived without celebration. Each achievement blended into the next. Contracts signed, profits reported, expectations rising again immediately afterward. There was no pause to feel satisfied. What once represented freedom gradually became obligation. Money solved logistical problems, but it never addressed the quiet absence that followed him from hotel room to hotel room, city to city, night after night. The press adored Adrian Vale. Business magazines featured his face beneath headlines praising discipline and vision. Interviews framed him as proof that intelligence and persistence could still create empires. Commentators analyzed his leadership style. Young entrepreneurs quoted his speeches online. To the public, Adrian represented possibility. Crowds applauded when he entered conference halls. Cameras followed his movements. His words were repeated far beyond the rooms in which he spoke. Yet admiration created distance. People approached him for inspiration, not connection. Conversations revolved around growth charts, strategies, and forecasts. Applause replaced friendship. Praise replaced intimacy. Few asked how he slept. Fewer wondered what waited for him when the events ended and the lights dimmed. Public respect elevated his image but quietly erased the human being beneath it, leaving him admired by millions and truly known by no one. At the end of each long day, Adrian returned to a home that echoed. His penthouse towered above the city, wrapped in glass and light. From the windows, the skyline shimmered like a reward meant to impress. Below, traffic flowed endlessly, alive and restless. Inside, everything was immaculate. Too immaculate. There were no photographs on the walls. No shoes by the door. No voices drifting from another room. Just carefully selected furniture and silence that greeted him without warmth. He often stood near the windows long after midnight, staring at the city he had conquered, feeling strangely disconnected from it all. The higher he lived, the more distant everything felt. The space was luxurious, yet lifeless, a place designed to impress visitors, not comfort its owner. Success had given him height, but it had taken away closeness. Loneliness did not arrive loudly in Adrian's life. It settled slowly, disguised as productivity. His calendar was always full. His phone never stopped buzzing. Yet none of those interactions reached beyond the surface. Conversations ended when meetings closed. Relationships paused when flights departed. There was no one to call when exhaustion weighed heavily. No voice asking how his day truly felt. No warmth waiting beyond the work. He had trained himself to believe that solitude was discipline, that sacrifice proved commitment. But over time, the silence grew heavier than failure ever had. At night, he replayed moments he'd skipped, birthdays, dinners, quiet mornings that never fit his schedule. He had achieved everything he promised himself, except peace. Because ambition had taught him how to build success, but never how to live inside it. Adrian Vale stood as proof that money could answer many questions, but not the most important ones. It could provide comfort, access, and security, yet it could not create belonging. It could attract admiration, yet it could not offer companionship. The more he accumulated, the clearer the absence became. His life looked complete to the outside world, but fulfillment remained out of reach. There was no sense of arrival, only continuation. No moment where success finally felt like enough. Deep down, Adrian began to understand a truth few speak aloud. Achievement without connection leaves an empty victory. The world celebrated what he had built, but inside, he felt unfinished. And without knowing it, the very thing he believed he had left behind long ago, love, family, meaning, was already shaping the moment that would soon change his life forever. The cafe sat on the corner of a quiet street where traffic passed slowly and familiarity ruled the atmosphere. Its windows were slightly fogged from constant warmth, and the scent of roasted coffee beans lingered in the air from morning until dusk. The furniture was mismatched, collected over time rather than purchased as a set, giving the place a comforting imperfection. Locals treated it like an extension of their homes. Students revised notes at small round tables. Elderly couples shared pastries in silence. Soft music played from an old speaker above the counter, often skipping between tracks. It wasn't the type of place that appeared in travel guides or business districts. But for Adrian, it became a second home. Every morning before the city fully woke, he claimed the same seat near the window, a corner table with a loose leg and a clear view of the street outside, unaware that this modest cafe was about to change the direction of his life. Mireia worked the early shift most mornings, tying her apron before sunrise and greeting customers with an easy warmth that felt genuine. She balanced the job with her studies, using the cafe income to cover tuition and rent. Despite the long hours, she carried herself with calm focus rather than fatigue. She remembered regular customers by name, knew who preferred extra foam, and noticed when someone seemed heavier than usual. Her presence softened the room. Conversations flowed more easily when she was nearby. Unlike others rushing through orders, Mireia took time, not because she moved slowly, but because she believed attention mattered. She noticed Adrian almost immediately, not for his appearance, but for his routine. Same seat, same notebook, same quiet intensity as he typed endlessly, pausing only to stare into space as if solving invisible problems. She often wondered what dreams kept him seated there for hours each day. Adrian arrived each morning with a worn backpack slung over one shoulder and dark circles beneath his eyes. Inside were notebooks filled with diagrams, numbers, and rough sketches of systems that existed only in his mind. He ordered the cheapest drink on the menu and made it last for hours. The cafe became his office. He coded relentlessly, rewriting the same lines until perfection felt close enough to touch. When frustration crept in, he stared out the window, replaying ideas until clarity returned. His laptop bore the marks of long nights, smudged keys, fading stickers, and overheating warnings he often ignored. Money was tight, sleep was optional, certainty was non-existent, yet determination anchored him. While others chased stability, Adrian chased possibility. He believed technology could solve inefficiencies others accepted as normal. Every failure felt like information, not defeat. He didn't notice time passing, only progress, however slow, forming beneath his fingertips. Their conversations began casually. A simple question about his order turned into brief exchanges about the weather, late nights, and long study hours. Over time, those moments stretched. Mireia started refilling his cup without asking. Adrian began arriving a few minutes earlier just to see her before the rush. They talked between customers and keyboard clicks. Some days it was light, jokes about broken printers or missed buses. Other days drifted deeper, touching on fears, hopes, and exhaustion neither spoke about easily elsewhere. They learned each other's rhythms. She noticed when his ideas weren't working. He noticed when her smile was forced after difficult exams. Without planning it, the cafe became a shared space, one where both felt understood. What started as routine slowly turned intentional. Neither called it anything yet, but both began looking forward to mornings more than they admitted. As days blended into weeks, conversation deepened beyond habit. Mireia listened as Adrian explained his ideas, not pretending to understand every technical detail, but grasping the intention behind them. She asked thoughtful questions that challenged his thinking in ways spreadsheets never could. He, in turn, listened when she spoke about children, emotional safety, and the importance of stability during early development. Her insight fascinated him. Where he spoke of systems, she spoke of people. They learned from one another. Adrian admired her empathy. Mireia admired his focus. Their differences didn't clash, they complemented. When doubt crept into his voice, she reminded him why he started. When stress weighed on her, he reminded her that perseverance wasn't weakness. Together, conversation became effortless, blending logic and feeling in a balance neither had known before. It wasn't romance yet, but it was something meaningful forming quietly between them. As days blended into weeks, conversation deepened beyond habit. Mireia listened as Adrian explained his ideas, not pretending to understand every technical detail, but grasping the intention behind them. She asked thoughtful questions that challenged his thinking in ways spreadsheets never could. He, in turn, listened when she spoke about children, emotional safety, and the importance of stability during early development. Her insight fascinated him. Where he spoke of systems, she spoke of people. They learned from one another. Adrian admired her empathy. Mireia admired his focus. Their differences didn't clash. They complemented. When doubt crept into his voice, she reminded him why he started. When stress weighed on her, he reminded her that perseverance wasn't weakness. Together, conversation became effortless, blending logic and feeling in a balance neither had known before. It wasn't romance yet, but it was something meaningful forming quietly between them. Admiration grew naturally between them, shaped by observation rather than words. Adrian respected Mireia's patience, the way she carried responsibility without complaint. He noticed how she treated every person with dignity, regardless of status or mood. Mireia, meanwhile, admired Adrian's resilience. She saw how failure didn't deter him, only redirected him. Even on days when his code crashed or funding prospects fell through, he returned the next morning with quiet resolve. They supported each other without obligation. She encouraged him when doubt clouded his confidence. He reminded her of her strength when exhaustion followed long shifts and late study sessions. Neither tried to impress. They simply showed up as themselves. Over time, admiration shifted into trust, the kind that grows when two people feel safe being honest. In that small cafe, surrounded by chipped mugs and gentle conversation, something rare formed. Not ambition, not dependency, but belief in one another. Their connection soon extended beyond the cafe doors. Adrian began walking Mireia home after her evening shifts. Sometimes they shared simple meals, cheap takeout eaten on park benches or stairs outside her apartment building. They talked until the city quieted around them. There were no grand dates, just presence. They studied together, supported deadlines, and celebrated small victories. A past exam, a promising email, a problem finally solved. Laughter came easily, especially during moments when nothing else seemed certain. When money ran thin, they shared optimism. When fear surfaced, they shared honesty. The relationship grew not from excitement, but from consistency. Each day reinforced trust. Each conversation strengthened understanding. They didn't rush love. They built it slowly, from routine, kindness, and shared belief that tomorrow could be better if faced together. Neither realized it then, but these early days would become the foundation they would both measure every future relationship against. Adrian and Mireia moved into a one-bedroom apartment tucked above a closed storefront on a quiet street. The space was narrow, with creaking floors and windows that rattled whenever buses passed. The heating worked only when it wanted to, and the kitchen barely allowed two people to stand side by side. Yet the apartment felt alive. They filled it with mismatched furniture collected from thrift shops and generosity from friends. A borrowed table became their dining space, work desk, and meeting room. At night, the hum of the city filtered through thin walls while they planned their futures lying on the floor. There was no luxury, no comfort promised, but there was closeness. Every challenge was shared within those walls, and every dream found room to breathe, even if the ceiling was low and the future uncertain. Money was a constant concern that never fully left their thoughts. Every expense required calculation. Groceries were counted item by item. Utility usage was monitored carefully. Unexpected costs brought sleepless nights. Adrian's income was inconsistent, dependent on short-term contracts that offered little security. Mireia's cafe wages barely covered rent. Some months, they chose which bills could wait and which could not. They learned restraint quickly. Entertainment became walks through nearby streets. Date nights meant shared meals at home. New clothes were postponed indefinitely. Still, neither complained aloud. They reassured each other that struggle was temporary, that effort would eventually produce stability. Even when envelopes stacked unopened on the counter, hope remained stronger than fear. Hardship tested their patience daily, but it also taught them teamwork, sacrifice, and trust in each other's endurance. Dinner was often decided by what remained in the cupboard. Most nights it was instant noodles prepared with creativity, added eggs when possible, shared seasoning packets, extra water to make it last. They joked about becoming experts at turning little into enough. Unpaid bills waited quietly on the counter. Electricity notices, internet warnings, rent reminders folded neatly beneath a magnet on the fridge. Adrian studied them each morning before opening his laptop, calculating timelines and possibilities. Some evenings, power dimmed unexpectedly, forcing them to light candles and laugh through inconvenience. Mireia would read aloud, while Adrian worked beside her, the glow flickering across unfinished dreams. They learned humility through simplicity. There was no shame in scarcity, only determination. Even when the world felt heavy, they reminded each other that this chapter was temporary, and survival itself was proof of progress. Laughter became their quiet rebellion. Even on the hardest days, they found reasons to smile. When noodles boiled over, they laughed. When the heater failed again, they bundled in blankets and joked about surviving winter indoors. When their chairs wobbled, they called it character. Mireia had a way of lightening tension with humor. Adrian learned to loosen his seriousness around her. They danced clumsily to old music playing from his laptop, pretending the apartment was larger than it was. Those moments mattered. Joy didn't erase hardship, but it softened it. Their laughter reminded them that struggle did not define who they were, only what they were passing through. In a life without excess, happiness came from connection. The absence of comfort made closeness stronger, and every shared smile reinforced the idea that togetherness could survive circumstances. The collapse came quietly. After months of development, presentations, and unanswered emails, Adrian's first startup ran out of options. Potential investors stopped replying. Trial users faded away. Costs continued rising while revenue never arrived. One evening, he closed his laptop and stared at the blank screen long after it powered down. The idea he had nurtured for years, the one meant to change everything, was over. No dramatic announcement followed, no applause, just silence. Adrian felt the weight of disappointment settle heavily on his chest. He questioned every decision, every hour spent chasing possibility instead of security. The failure wasn't public, but it felt personal. For the first time, doubt outweighed belief. He wondered if ambition had misled him, and whether dreaming big had cost them too much already. Failure hit Adrian harder than he expected. Sleep became restless. His thoughts replayed mistakes relentlessly. He avoided his laptop for days, afraid of facing the silence it now represented. Confidence gave way to frustration, then to shame. One night, exhaustion finally broke through his restraint. He admitted aloud what he had feared privately, that he might not be good enough, that perhaps success belonged to others, not to someone constantly starting over. Tears came unexpectedly, fueled by pressure he had buried for years. He worried he had dragged Mireia into uncertainty with nothing to show for it. For the first time, he considered quitting entirely. The dream that once energized him now felt heavy, and in that small apartment, surrounded by reminders of effort without reward, Adrian questioned whether belief alone could carry them any further. Mireia never tried to fix the failure. She didn't offer empty reassurance or pretend everything was fine. Instead, she sat beside Adrian, listened without interruption, and allowed him to release what he had been carrying. When his voice shook, she held his hand. When he doubted himself, she reminded him of how far he had already come, of the skills he had built, the discipline he possessed, and the resilience he showed even in loss. She spoke gently but firmly. Failure, she told him, was not proof of inability, only evidence of effort. The idea had fallen, not the man behind it. Her belief never wavered. She didn't measure his worth by outcomes, but by perseverance. And slowly, her faith became the mirror he needed to see himself clearly again. Reply approved when ready, and I'll continue with Part 8. Strength of their bond deepens. Thank you. Here is Section 4, Part 7, written to approximately 150 words, focused on emotional grounding and recovery. Part 7. Mireia supports and motivates him. Mireia never tried to fix the failure. She didn't offer empty reassurance or pretend everything was fine. Instead, she sat beside Adrian, listened without interruption, and allowed him to release what he had been carrying. When his voice shook, she held his hand. When he doubted himself, she reminded him of how far he had already come, of the skills he had built, the discipline he possessed, and the resilience he showed even in loss. She spoke gently but firmly. Failure, she told him, was not proof of inability, only evidence of effort. The idea had fallen, not the man behind it. Her belief never wavered. She didn't measure his worth by outcomes, but by perseverance. And slowly, her faith became the mirror he needed to see himself clearly again. What they endured together reshaped their relationship. The hardship, the uncertainty, and the long nights forged something stronger than excitement ever could. They learned how each reacted under pressure, how disappointment was handled, and how patience could hold two people steady. Adrian trusted Mireia not only with his dreams, but with his fears. Mireia trusted that his ambition would not erase his heart. Their connection matured from affection into partnership. They were no longer just two people in love. They were a team. Every obstacle faced together strengthened that truth. The struggle didn't weaken them, it refined them. And in the absence of comfort, they found commitment. They believed the future would eventually reward their effort. Neither imagined how far that future would carry Adrian, nor how deeply it would test the bond they had built during the hardest days of their lives. The message arrived on an ordinary afternoon, hidden among rejection emails and unanswered follow-ups. Adrian almost ignored it. A mid-sized investment firm had reviewed his previous work. They believed his ideas showed promise, not perfection, but potential. They wanted to fund a new version of his technology, backed by real capital and real expectations. For the first time in years, opportunity felt tangible. The offer included funding, mentorship, office resources, and a structured path towards scale. It was everything Adrian had chased since his first failure. He reread the email several times, afraid it might vanish. Excitement rushed through him, followed quickly by fear. This wasn't a side project anymore. It was a doorway, one that could finally change their lives. But as Adrian read further, a quiet unease formed. Because opportunity rarely arrives without cost, the offer came with a condition that tightened Adrian's chest. Relocation was required immediately. The firm's headquarters was several states away, and they expected full presence from day one. Long hours, constant availability, and complete focus were non-negotiable. This wasn't something that could be balanced from afar. The timeline allowed no space for preparation. 2 weeks. That was all he had to uproot his life. Adrian stared at the screen, excitement battling uncertainty. This was the chance he had waited years for. Yet it demanded separation from the life he had built with Mireia. The apartment suddenly felt smaller. He imagined unfamiliar streets, new offices, unfamiliar faces, and Mireia not beside him. For the first time, success required choosing between proximity and possibility, and no version of the decision felt painless. The goodbye came faster than either expected. Suitcases replaced shared dinners. Schedules replaced spontaneity. Within days, Adrian was gone, settling into a small temporary apartment near his new office, while Mireia remained behind. At first, optimism carried them. They promised frequent calls, weekend visits, constant updates. Messages filled their phones from morning until night. They spoke about the distance as temporary, a sacrifice for something better. Adrian buried himself in work. Mireia filled her evenings with study and extra shifts. But time zones complicated everything. When one was free, the other was exhausted. Calls were postponed. Messages waited unanswered longer than intended. They were still together, yet no longer sharing life. Distance did not break them immediately. It simply began changing them quietly. At first, their calls stretched late into the night. They spoke about everything: his new responsibilities, her exams, the familiar cafe they both missed. Hearing each other's voices eased the absence. But slowly, the calls changed. 10 minutes replaced an hour. Updates replaced conversations. Adrian often called while walking between meetings, his attention divided. Mireia listened to background noise and unfamiliar voices drifting through the line. Silence began filling the gaps. Some nights, exhaustion won, and calls were skipped entirely. Apologies followed in the morning, always sincere, always brief. Neither meant harm. Yet intimacy faded in the pauses between conversations. What once felt effortless began requiring effort neither knew how to ask for. The distance was no longer measured in miles, but in moments no longer shared. As weeks passed, emotional closeness thinned. Adrian spoke mostly about deadlines, investors, and progress reports. Mireia spoke about daily life, classes, work, routine moments that no longer felt important enough to share. They listened, but not fully. Conversations lost warmth. Laughter arrived less often. Silence lingered longer. Neither wanted to burden the other. Mireia didn't want to distract him. Adrian didn't want to admit how overwhelmed he felt. In protecting each other, they stopped reaching deeply. Connection turned polite. Affection turned scheduled. They still cared, profoundly, but care alone couldn't bridge absence. Each hung up believing the other was drifting, unaware both were holding on quietly. The space between them grew not from lack of love, but from too much distance to express it. Pressure quickly overtook tenderness. Adrian's days blurred into endless responsibility. Investors demanded results. Expectations rose weekly. Sleep shortened. Mistakes carried consequences he couldn't afford. When Mireia called, he often sounded distracted, his thoughts still locked in meetings that had already ended. Stress followed him into every conversation. Affection became difficult to express. Warm words felt rushed. Compliments disappeared beneath exhaustion. Even concern sounded impatient. Mireia sensed the change immediately. The man who once listened intently now responded with brief reassurances. Not unkind, just stretched too thin. Love didn't vanish. It was crowded out. Where closeness once lived, pressure settled instead. And without intending to, they began associating each other with tension rather than comfort. A shift neither recognized until it had already taken root. One evening, after another shortened call, Mireia sat quietly with her phone resting in her hands. The room felt heavier than usual. She wasn't angry. She was uncertain. Adrian spoke often about growth, expansion, and the years ahead, yet rarely spoke about them. His future sounded full, but she struggled to hear where she fit inside it. When she finally voiced her concern, her tone was gentle. She asked where she belonged in the life he was building. There was no accusation, only vulnerability. Adrian hesitated, not because he didn't care, but because he didn't know how to promise what he couldn't yet see. His silence lingered longer than intended. And in that pause, Mireia felt something shift, the realization that love alone might not be enough to close the distance between their worlds. The end came without raised voices or harsh words. There was no argument, only honesty spoken through tired hearts. They acknowledged what neither wanted to admit. Distance had reshaped them into people living separate lives. They still cared deeply. That was the hardest part. Adrian admitted he couldn't give her the presence she deserved while carrying the weight of his new responsibilities. Mireia admitted she could no longer wait in uncertainty, unsure if she was walking beside him or behind him. They parted with understanding, not bitterness. Tears replaced anger. Gratitude replaced blame. They promised to remember each other kindly, not as a failure, but as a chapter that shaped who they were becoming. When the call ended, neither felt relief, only loss. Two people choosing what seemed right, unaware of how much that decision would echo through the years ahead. The realization came quietly, without drama or warning. Mireia noticed the changes first: fatigue that lingered, mornings that felt heavier, a sense that her body was asking for attention. At first, she dismissed it as stress from work and study. Life had been exhausting lately. But instinct told her otherwise. When the confirmation arrived, she sat still for a long time, staring at the result in disbelief. Her thoughts scattered between shock and disbelief, joy and fear. She had not planned for this. The relationship had ended only weeks earlier. Their lives had just begun moving apart. Yet here she was, holding evidence that their connection had left something permanent behind. Her hands trembled slightly. A new life had begun, fragile, unexpected, and deeply intertwined with a man who was now hundreds of miles away. The first appointment brought clarity and concern. After routine examinations, the doctor's expression shifted subtly. Mireia noticed immediately. Additional tests followed, more waiting, more silence filled with unease. When the explanation came, it was gentle but serious. Her pregnancy carried complications that required close monitoring. There were risks, not immediate, but significant enough to change everything. The doctor explained that stress, exhaustion, and delay could affect outcomes. Mireia listened carefully, nodding as information settled heavily. She was advised to limit work hours, rest more, and prepare for uncertainty. Walking home afterward, the city felt louder than usual. What had once been an emotional shock now became a medical reality. This was no longer just about timing or relationships. It was about responsibility. The path ahead was unclear, filled with decisions she never expected to make alone, decisions that could affect more than just her own life. Fear settled in slowly. It followed Mireia through quiet mornings and restless nights. Questions repeated endlessly, without answers. Would the pregnancy remain stable? Would she manage alone? How would she support a child with limited income and fragile health? Uncertainty pressed against every decision. She worried about missed appointments, rising expenses, and the physical toll her body was already feeling. Some days, confidence surfaced briefly, only to vanish by evening. Loneliness weighed heavily. She could no longer share these fears with Adrian, yet his absence echoed constantly. The future she once imagined had shifted entirely, leaving her standing at its edge alone. Despite moments of courage, fear often returned, not dramatic or overwhelming, but persistent. It whispered doubts in the quiet. Still, beneath it all lived a growing sense of protection. Whatever lay ahead, she knew one truth clearly. This life depended on her now, and that knowledge changed everything. Mireia tried to reach Adrian the very next day. She called once, then again later that evening. The calls went unanswered. She left a message, unsure how much to say, unsure where to begin. Days passed. She sent texts carefully worded, not wanting to overwhelm him. Each message showed as delivered. None were returned. When she contacted his office, she was told he was in meetings scheduled weeks in advance. The assistant promised to pass along her name, but no response followed. She waited. Every vibration of her phone sparked hope, then disappointment. Adrian's world had grown larger, busier, louder. Hers had narrowed to a quiet room and an unanswered screen. She never believed he was ignoring her intentionally. She knew his life had accelerated beyond reach, but knowing that didn't ease the ache. The silence forced a realization she wasn't ready for. She might have to face this without him. At her next visit, the conversation deepened. After reviewing new results, the doctor spoke carefully, choosing words that carried weight without alarm. Due to underlying complications, future pregnancies might not be possible. This one, though fragile, could be her only opportunity to become a mother. The statement settled heavily in the room. Mireia felt her breath slow as she absorbed its meaning. This was no longer a question of timing or circumstance. It was a crossroad. Ending the pregnancy to wait for stability carried the risk of waiting forever. Continuing meant uncertainty, sacrifice, and a path filled with difficulty. She left the clinic with her thoughts spinning. The choice was hers alone, and it carried lifelong consequence. That night, she placed her hands gently over her stomach, feeling an unfamiliar sense of connection. Whatever fear remained, clarity began forming. This life mattered. Not someday, not later, now. The decision did not come suddenly. It formed through sleepless nights, careful planning, and quiet conversations with herself. Mireia weighed every outcome: financial strain, emotional exhaustion, and the absence of a partner. Yet each time she imagined walking away, her chest tightened. This child, these children, were not mistakes. They were unexpected but real. She accepted that waiting for Adrian to return or respond could cost her precious time. His life had moved forward at a speed she could not interrupt. So she chose certainty over hope. She adjusted her schedule, increased work hours where possible, and began preparing for motherhood without support. Pride did not guide her, responsibility did. She promised herself that her children would never feel unwanted or uncertain of love. Even if the road ahead was difficult, she would walk it fully present. Alone did not mean broken. It meant brave. While Mireia's life shifted entirely, Adrian knew nothing. His days were consumed by meetings, projections, and relentless expectations. Notifications stacked endlessly. Messages blurred together. Her name never appeared again. Not because she stopped thinking of him, but because her attempts never reached him. He assumed she had moved on. There was no conversation, no explanation, no closure. From his perspective, the past had simply gone quiet. He built his future believing their story had ended cleanly, unaware that it had continued, quietly, painfully, and without him. He never knew about the medical risks, never knew about the long nights or difficult decisions, never knew that 2 lives had begun carrying his features and his future. Years would pass before truth crossed his path again, and when it did, it would arrive without warning, standing before him, holding his reflection in small hands. The day arrived sooner than Mireia expected. Pain began before sunrise, steady and insistent, forcing her to grip the edge of the bed as reality set in. By the time she reached the hospital, contractions came in waves that stole her breath. Nurses moved quickly, guiding her through corridors while offering calm reassurance. Hours blurred together. Fear, strength, and hope collided, as she fought through exhaustion with quiet resolve. There was no hand to hold, no familiar voice beside her, only determination and the promise she had made to herself. When the first cry finally pierced the room, tears streamed down her face. Then another followed. 2 lives entered the world minutes apart. Kaya arrived first. Noor followed soon after, small, fragile, and perfect. In that moment, despite the pain and loneliness, Mireia felt something powerful settle within her. She was no longer alone. When Mireia finally held the twins side by side, she noticed it instantly. Their faces were strikingly familiar. Though newborn and delicate, the structure was unmistakable. The curve of their noses, the shape of their brows, even the softness of their expressions echoed someone she had loved deeply. It startled her. She studied them closely, searching for difference, but found reflection instead. The resemblance was not vague or imagined. It was precise. Anyone who had known Adrian would recognize it immediately. A mixture of emotion washed through her, wonder, ache, and acceptance. She had carried them alone, yet they carried him unmistakably. The realization stirred memories she had tried to quiet. These girls were not only her children. They were proof of a past that had not disappeared, only transformed into 2 breathing lives resting gently against her chest. As the hours passed, the resemblance became clearer. Both girls opened their eyes briefly, revealing the same grey-blue shade Mireia remembered so well. It was the color that once studied her across cafe tables, filled with ambition and curiosity. When Kaya yawned, a small indentation appeared on her left cheek. The same dimple Adrian had carried since childhood. Mireia's breath caught. No matter how she tried to rationalize it, there was no denying the truth written into their features. Genetics had spoken plainly. She traced her finger gently across Noor's cheek, then Kaya's, overwhelmed by how much of him lived within them. They would grow older, ask questions, notice similarities. One day, they would want answers. For now, Mireia pressed her forehead against theirs, silently promising that whatever the future brought, she would protect them, with honesty, love, and unwavering care. The room felt still once the rush faded. Machines hummed softly nearby as daylight filtered through the curtains. Mireia lay exhausted but alert, watching her daughters sleep in clear bassinets beside her bed. Tears slipped freely down her face, not from pain, but from release. She had made it. Every fear, every sleepless night, every uncertain moment had led here. The weight of responsibility settled gently rather than heavily, accompanied by an unexpected calm. A nurse congratulated her quietly and adjusted the blankets. Mireia whispered the girls' names aloud for the first time. Kaya, Noor. Hearing them made everything real. Though the room held no visitors and no celebrations, it overflowed with emotion. Love filled the silence where others might have stood. In that space, she understood something clearly. Even alone, she was enough for them. Exhaustion settled into Mireia's bones the moment adrenaline faded. Her body ached from hours of labor. Her eyelids felt heavy, yet she refused to sleep for long. Each soft breath from the bassinets pulled her attention back. She watched them constantly. Every rise of their chests reassured her. Every small sound kept her alert. Rest felt secondary now. Despite the fatigue, determination burned quietly within her. She reminded herself that weakness was temporary. Responsibility was permanent. These children depended entirely on her, for warmth, safety, guidance, and love. There would be no passing them to someone else when it became difficult. She straightened her shoulders, even while lying down. Tired did not mean defeated. As the room dimmed into evening, Mireia reached out and touched both bassinets gently, making herself a promise she intended to keep, no matter how hard the days ahead became. The first weeks tested Mireia in ways nothing else had. Sleep came in fragments. Nights blurred into mornings. Feeding schedules overlapped. Cries echoed one after the other, and rest felt like a distant memory. When one baby settled, the other stirred. Her body was still healing, yet there was no pause. Some mornings she stood in the kitchen holding both girls, unsure when she had last eaten. Laundry piled up. Dishes waited. Time disappeared. There were moments she cried quietly while rocking them, afraid her tears might wake them. But each struggle was followed by something stronger, a tiny hand curling around her finger, a calm breath against her chest. She learned endurance through repetition. Motherhood was relentless, demanding everything she had. And somehow she found more. Sacrifice became part of Mireya's routine. She skipped meals to stretch groceries. She accepted extra shifts despite exhaustion. Dreams of continuing her education were postponed without complaint. Every decision centered on the twins. She learned to live without rest, without help, without recognition. No one applauded the nights she stayed awake holding feverish babies. No one saw the moments she chose necessities over comfort. She never spoke of the loneliness. Instead, she smiled for Kaya and Noor, shielding them from hardship they were too young to understand. Her strength was quiet, built in moments no one witnessed. Years would pass before anyone realized what it cost her to raise them alone. But in every sacrifice lived purpose, because love, when unconditional, does not ask to be seen, it simply endures. What began as a modest operation transformed faster than anyone predicted. Within 2 years of securing funding, Veil Dynamics expanded beyond national borders. Its systems were adopted by logistics firms, financial institutions, and enterprise networks across multiple continents. Offices opened in major cities. New teams formed weekly. Demand outpaced supply. Adrian moved from pitching ideas to approving global strategies. Contracts arrived faster than they could be processed. Partnerships formed with corporations that once ignored his emails. His company's technology became known for reliability and precision, quietly powering operations people depended on daily. Industry leaders spoke his company's name with respect. What once required persuasion now required restraint. Veil Dynamics was no longer chasing relevance, it had become essential. From conference rooms overseas to late-night briefings across time zones, Adrian watched his creation evolve into something vast, powerful, and unstoppable. The dream had finally taken shape. As the company expanded, wealth followed relentlessly. Adrian's equity increased with every successful quarter. Numbers on financial statements climbed so high they stopped feeling real. Advisors handled portfolios. Account managers handled transfers. Money moved without his involvement. He went from calculating expenses carefully to approving investments without hesitation. Stability turned into abundance almost overnight. His income exceeded what he once imagined possible. Opportunities multiplied. Stocks, properties, ventures seeking his name more than his attention. Yet the speed of accumulation left little time for reflection. Each milestone arrived quietly, folded into the next expectation. There was no celebration when he crossed financial thresholds he once dreamed of reaching. No sense of arrival. Only momentum. Wealth solved problems he once feared, rent, debt, security, but it also created distance between who he was and who he remembered being. The boy counting coins at cafe tables felt like someone else entirely. With wealth came access. Adrian acquired residences in cities he rarely had time to explore. Each home was designed for comfort, floor-to-ceiling windows, quiet security, spaces curated by professionals who never met him. They were impressive, flawless, and impersonal. He traveled constantly. Commercial flights became impractical. Private travel allowed efficiency, privacy, and control over time. Airports blurred together. Countries passed beneath him unnoticed. Suitcases stayed packed. Beds changed weekly. Luxury became routine rather than remarkable. While others viewed his lifestyle with admiration, Adrian experienced it as motion without grounding. Each place offered convenience, but no belonging. Every return felt temporary. He owned more space than ever before, yet none of it felt like home. The freedom he once chased began to resemble displacement, disguised beneath comfort and convenience. Public attention followed success closely. Adrian's face appeared in financial publications and leadership features. Panels requested his presence. Universities invited him to speak. His opinions were quoted as guidance for emerging founders. Applause became familiar. Rooms quieted when he spoke. Cameras flashed as he entered events. His name carried authority long before introductions were made. Yet fame offered distance rather than connection. People admired what he represented, not who he was. Conversations revolved around strategy, expansion, and valuation, never emotions, never doubts. Strangers claimed inspiration without knowing his story. Recognition felt hollow. Praise echoed briefly, then faded. Each appearance ended the same way, polite farewells and empty hotel rooms. Success had amplified his voice, but silenced everything else. Being known by many did not mean being understood by anyone, and as admiration increased, so did isolation. Despite everything he had achieved, something inside Adrian remained untouched. There was no sense of fulfillment waiting after accomplishments. Victories felt brief, fading the moment attention shifted to the next goal. He woke each morning with obligations, not excitement. Even moments meant for celebration felt muted. Success no longer thrilled him, it simply demanded maintenance. Loneliness followed him silently through crowded spaces. He sat across from influential people, yet felt unseen. Laughter at events sounded distant, as though belonging to someone else's life. At night, he stared at unfamiliar ceilings, wondering when ambition stopped feeling purposeful. He had built a world of achievement, but emotion had not kept pace. Without realizing it, he measured happiness by productivity, and came up empty every time. The absence wasn't dramatic, it was persistent, a quiet reminder that progress without connection leaves the heart behind. There was no one waiting for Adrian at the end of his days. No shared meals, no familiar voice asking how he was holding up, no child's laughter filling the silence. His homes were places he occupied, not spaces built around connection. He had colleagues, partners, acquaintances, but no anchor. Relationships never progressed beyond convenience. Travel schedules interrupted consistency. Commitments dissolved before taking root. When problems arose, he handled them alone. When success arrived, there was no one to celebrate with meaning. The life he had built demanded independence, but offered little warmth in return. Without family or emotional grounding, achievement felt unstable, impressive, yet empty. He had climbed higher than he ever imagined, but standing at the top, Adrian realized something painful. Success without someone to share it with becomes a lonely view. Adrian met Celine Rowe during a private investment forum hosted in the city's financial district. Unlike most introductions in his life, this one wasn't rushed or transactional. Their conversation unfolded naturally, guided by mutual curiosity rather than advantage. Celine carried herself with calm confidence. She spoke with clarity, listened attentively, and asked thoughtful questions that revealed sharp insight. There was nothing performative about her presence. She understood the language of finance, but she didn't hide behind it. Adrian found her refreshing. She wasn't intimidated by his success, nor overly impressed. She treated him as a man, not a headline. Their first meeting ended with exchanged numbers and an unexpected sense of ease. For the first time in years, Adrian felt comfortable being himself, not the executive, not the founder, but simply a person enjoying conversation without expectation. Celine came from a family deeply rooted in finance and international consulting. Her upbringing exposed her early to global markets, diplomacy, and high-level negotiation. Yet she never relied on her background for credibility. She had built her own reputation. Educated at prestigious institutions, Celine moved effortlessly between corporate environments and social gatherings. Her confidence came not from status, but from preparation. Elegance followed her naturally, in the way she spoke, dressed, and handled pressure. She was composed without being distant, refined without appearing unreachable. Connections surrounded her, yet she remained grounded. To Adrian, her world felt familiar yet calmer than his own. She understood his schedule, his obligations, and the cost of leadership. There was comfort in that understanding. With Celine, nothing required explanation. Their lives aligned smoothly, two people shaped by ambition, discipline, and responsibility. As their relationship became visible, public reaction followed quickly. Industry circles approved almost instantly. Friends, colleagues, and partners viewed them as well-matched, intelligent, composed and equally driven. Wherever they appeared together, admiration trailed behind them. They attended conferences side by side. Photographs circulated quietly at first, then more widely. Observers praised their balance and shared influence. People described them as strategic equals. Celine complimented Adrian's presence effortlessly. She understood when to step forward and when to remain behind the scenes. Conversations flowed smoothly at events, free of awkward explanations or tension. To outsiders, they represented harmony. A successful man with a woman who fit seamlessly into his world. Compliments arrived constantly about timing, compatibility, and shared ambition. Many said he had finally found someone who understood his life, and in many ways, they were right. Yet approval from others did not always translate into certainty within him. The proposal came during a quiet weekend away from the city. There were no cameras, no spectacle, only a private moment shaped by intention rather than display. Adrian spoke honestly about stability, partnership, and building a future grounded in mutual understanding. Celine accepted without hesitation. When the announcement became public days later, congratulations poured in immediately. Messages flooded in from executives, investors, and acquaintances who felt invested in his happiness. The engagement was framed as a milestone, proof that Adrian's life had reached balance at last. Business publications noted it casually alongside earnings reports. Social circles celebrated the union as inevitable. For the first time, his personal life appeared settled. Yet even as the ring rested comfortably on Celine's hand, Adrian felt a quiet stillness rather than excitement. Not doubt, something more difficult to define. A sense that while everything looked complete, something inside him remained unresolved. The announcement ignited widespread attention. News outlets highlighted the engagement as the union of influence and achievement. Articles praised their compatibility, describing them as two leaders aligned in vision and stature. Photographs of them at formal events circulated widely, framed as symbols of modern success. Commentators admired how seamlessly their lives merged. Technology and finance, ambition and refinement. They were labeled a power couple almost overnight. Invitations multiplied. Appearances were requested. Their names were mentioned together more often than separately. To the world, the match seemed flawless. Everything about them appeared intentional and impressive. Their schedules aligned. Their conversations impressed. Their future looked structured and secure. But behind the applause and admiration, Adrian felt strangely distant from it all. The celebration belonged to everyone else. While the world applauded the image they projected, he quietly questioned whether perfection on paper guaranteed fulfillment in reality. Despite the admiration surrounding him, Adrian felt unchanged inside. His life looked balanced: success, partnership, respect, yet something remained absent. Celine offered stability and understanding, but warmth did not come naturally to him anymore. He smiled often, fulfilled obligations, attended events, and planned for the future. Still, a quiet emptiness lingered. There were moments when he found himself thinking of a simpler time, long conversations, shared laughter, and dreams spoken freely without expectation. The memories arrived uninvited, then faded just as quickly. He dismissed them as nostalgia, yet completeness never arrived. He was moving forward, doing everything expected of him, yet fulfillment stayed just out of reach. Adrian had built a life admired by many, but deep down, he sensed that something essential was missing. Not success, not comfort, not recognition. Something far more human. The conversation came on an evening that felt ordinary. Celine sat across from Adrian at the dining table, her hands folded carefully as though preparing for difficult news. Her voice remained calm, but the pause before she spoke revealed hesitation. She explained that she had faced fertility challenges for years, long before they met. Medical evaluations in her past had shown complications that made conception uncertain. She had hoped time or treatment might improve the outlook, but clarity had only become firmer. Adrian listened without interruption. She admitted the topic frightened her, not because of the diagnosis itself, but because of what it might mean for their future. She worried about disappointing him, about becoming an obstacle to the life he envisioned. The honesty between them was heavy. In that moment, marriage no longer felt abstract. It became real, bound not only by affection, but by biology, uncertainty, and difficult choices ahead. After the conversation, something shifted between them. Neither argued, yet tension lingered quietly. Celine grew more guarded, watching Adrian for signs of disappointment he never voiced. Adrian, unsure how to respond, chose reassurance, though uncertainty followed him. They spoke about the future carefully now. Topics once assumed required discussion. Timelines felt fragile, expectations blurred. Adrian assured her that parenthood was not a condition of his love, but even his reassurance carried weight. Celine feared he was protecting her feelings rather than expressing his own. Moments of closeness were interrupted by unspoken worry. They still functioned well together, attending events, maintaining routines, yet emotional ease faded slightly. Concern replaced spontaneity. The challenge was not blame. It was pressure. Pressure to remain strong, hopeful, and aligned while confronting a reality neither had anticipated when they imagined marriage. After further consultations, Celine's doctors reviewed her medical history in depth. Tests were repeated, evaluations expanded, and options discussed with careful precision. The conclusion was clear. While natural conception remained uncertain, advanced treatment could improve their chances significantly, but only under specialized care. Her physician recommended a private reproductive center known for discretion, innovation, and exceptional success rates. It was not a typical hospital. The clinic served individuals who required privacy and advanced technology, offering tailored treatment plans unavailable elsewhere. Its reputation was built quietly through results rather than publicity. Adrian listened closely as the doctor explained timelines, procedures, and expectations. The recommendation brought both relief and gravity. There was a path forward, but it would require commitment, patience, and emotional resilience. This was no longer theoretical. It was a decision that demanded intention, trust, and hope, balanced carefully against reality. The decision did not come immediately. Adrian and Celine spent nights discussing possibilities, fears, and expectations. They weighed emotional toll against desire, uncertainty against hope. Neither wanted to rush, but over time, clarity formed. Celine expressed her wish to try, not out of pressure, but from longing. Adrian supported her without hesitation, offering reassurance that the outcome would not define their worth as a couple. They agreed to proceed together. Appointments were scheduled, plans rearranged, schedules adjusted to allow flexibility. For the first time since the diagnosis, optimism returned cautiously. This step represented more than medical intervention. It symbolized unity. Whatever awaited them, they would face it side by side. The process would demand vulnerability and patience, but choosing action over fear brought comfort. With resolve replacing hesitation, they prepared themselves emotionally for the journey ahead. Aurora Lux Medical Clinic stood apart from anything Adrian had seen before. Designed for privacy and calm, the facility welcomed patients through discreet entrances and personalized scheduling. Every detail, from consultation rooms to treatment areas, emphasized dignity and care. The staff spoke softly. Appointments ran on time. Information was delivered with clarity and patience. It was a place built for hope without spectacle. Known for advanced reproductive treatment, Aurora Lux combined modern science with personal attention. Each case was handled individually, guided by specialists who understood the emotional weight behind every visit. For Celine, the environment offered reassurance. For Adrian, it felt like control, a setting where problems had plans and uncertainty had structure. As they stepped inside for their first consultation, neither imagined how that decision would ripple far beyond treatment. Because within those walls waited a moment that would reopen the past and redefine everything they believed about family. Aurora Lux Medical Clinic felt more like a private retreat than a medical facility. Polished stone floors reflected soft daylight streaming through tall glass panels. Subtle artwork lined the walls, chosen to calm rather than impress. Seating was spaced generously, offering privacy without isolation. The air carried a faint scent of cleanliness mixed with warmth. Voices were low, footsteps gentle. Every element suggested reassurance, that whatever burden brought someone here would be handled with care. Adrian noticed the details instinctively. This place promised solutions, order, control. A concierge greeted them by name and guided them toward the reception desk. Tablets replaced paperwork. Appointments appeared already prepared. Everything moved smoothly, too smoothly. As they settled into the waiting area, Adrian exhaled quietly, unaware that the calm surrounding him was moments away from shattering, not through medicine, but through memory. A nurse approached with a gentle smile and called Celine's name. She stood, smoothing her jacket, and exchanged a brief glance with Adrian. It was a familiar look, reassurance mixed with anticipation. "This shouldn't take long," she said quietly. Adrian nodded and squeezed her hand once before she followed the nurse down a corridor that curved out of sight. Her footsteps faded. The space beside him felt instantly larger. He watched the hallway for a moment, then turned back to the waiting area, settling into his chair. Around him, other patients sat in quiet reflection, some alone, some whispering to companions. Time slowed. Adrian checked his phone, scanning emails out of habit, unaware that the routine pause he'd entered was about to transform into the most defining moment of his life. Alone in the waiting area, Adrian leaned back slightly and glanced around. The environment encouraged patience, comfortable seating, quiet music, soft lighting. Yet, stillness made his thoughts restless. He opened his calendar, reviewing meetings scheduled weeks ahead. His mind drifted briefly toward upcoming negotiations and travel plans. This appointment, he told himself, was another task to manage. He adjusted his watch, checking the time more often than necessary. Across the room, a family rose to leave. A staff member passed silently. Nothing seemed unusual, and yet something tugged faintly at his awareness, a sense of anticipation without explanation. He dismissed it. Waiting had become routine in his life. He had no reason to believe this pause would be any different from the thousands that came before. Until he lifted his eyes. The sound of the doors opening drew his attention. It was subtle, a soft glide followed by footsteps, but enough to pull his focus from the screen in his hand. Adrian lifted his head absent-mindedly, expecting nothing more than another patient entering the room. His gaze drifted across the waiting area. Then it stopped. Something about the figure near the entrance caught him off guard. The way she stood, the familiar posture, the calm stillness that once comforted him. His chest tightened slightly. For a moment, he questioned his own perception. Years had passed, faces changed, memory could play tricks. Yet as she stepped further inside, doubt vanished. Recognition struck instantly, sharp and undeniable. It wasn't possible, and yet she was standing there. Adrian's breath caught as recognition settled fully. It was Mireia, older now, yet unmistakable. Her features had softened, her posture steadier, but her presence carried the same quiet strength he remembered. Time had changed details, not essence. For several seconds he forgot where he was. The world narrowed to the space between them. She had not noticed him yet. Her attention remained focused ahead, one hand adjusting her bag, the other reaching behind her gently, as if guiding someone unseen. Adrian stood halfway without realizing it, heart racing. Questions rushed through him, colliding without order. Why was she here? How long had it been? Before he could gather himself, movement beside her drew his attention, small shadows stepping forward into view. Two young girls walked at Mireia's side, each holding one of her hands. They moved with the easy rhythm of children accustomed to staying close. One leaned slightly into her hip. The other glanced around the room with open curiosity. Adrian's heart stuttered. They were the same height, the same age. Their steps nearly matched. He noticed how one tucked loose hair behind her ear, while the other hummed softly to herself. They looked comfortable, safe, clearly hers. Yet something deeper pulled at him. The longer he looked, the more unease formed in his chest. It wasn't simply that they were twins. It was the familiarity, A sense that he had seen these faces before, not in memory, but in reflection. His pulse quickened as realization edged closer. The resemblance struck with unsettling clarity. Their facial structure mirrored his own, the same brow shape, the same curve along the jawline. Even the way they held their mouths when concentrating felt achingly familiar. Adrian's breath shortened. One of the girls smiled briefly, revealing a dimple on her left cheek. His dimple. The room seemed to tilt slightly as recognition surged through him. This wasn't coincidence. It was inheritance written openly across their faces. He searched for denial and found none. Every feature told the same story. His reflection stood before him, twice, living proof of a life he never knew existed. His hands trembled at his sides as understanding crashed in waves. Before he could speak or move, a small voice broke the silence. One of the girls tugged gently at Mireya's sleeve. Her voice was soft, curious, free of caution or awareness of consequence. "Mum," she said, pointing slightly, "that man looks like us." The words landed instantly. Adrian felt them strike deeper than any accusation ever could. His chest tightened, breath caught between disbelief and certainty. Nearby conversations faded into distance. Mireya froze. Her fingers stiffened around her daughter's hands as realization washed across her face. Slowly, she turned. Their eyes met. Time seemed to pause between recognition and reaction. Adrian's mouth opened, but no sound emerged. Nothing he had prepared for in life compared to the simplicity of that sentence, spoken without intention, yet revealing everything he had never known. Mireya's expression shifted instantly. Without a word, she tightened her grip on the girl's hands and lowered her voice, guiding them gently but firmly toward the hallway. Her movements were controlled, but her trembling fingers betrayed urgency. "Come on," she said softly. The twins followed without protest. Adrian took a step forward instinctively, but his feet refused to move further. Shock rooted him in place as she passed by, close enough that he caught the familiar scent he hadn't known he still remembered. She did not look back. Within seconds, she disappeared down the corridor, her footsteps fading into distance. The waiting area returned to stillness, but Adrian remained frozen, because in a single moment, his past had collided with his present, and nothing he believed about his life felt certain anymore. Adrian didn't remember standing up. One moment he was frozen in the waiting area, the next he was moving, past the desk, through the glass doors, into the open courtyard behind the clinic. The air outside felt cooler, heavier. Mireya stood near the garden path, her back turned, one hand pressed lightly against her chest as she steadied her breathing. The twins were seated nearby, occupied with a small fountain, unaware of the storm surrounding them. Adrian slowed his steps. He hadn't seen her this close in years. She looked stronger somehow, not hardened, but grounded. The woman who once believed in him before anyone else now stood as someone shaped by responsibility he had never shared. When she sensed him behind her, she didn't turn immediately. She already knew, and when she finally faced him, the silence between them carried every unanswered question left behind by time. Neither of them spoke at first. Adrian searched her face for anger, but found restraint instead, a quiet tension held carefully in place. Mireya crossed her arms, not defensively but protectively, as though bracing herself. "You weren't supposed to see me like that," she said softly. Her voice carried no accusation, only vulnerability. Adrian struggled to respond. His thoughts collided, questions stacking faster than he could form words. He gestured vaguely toward the twins. They look like me," he whispered. Mireya's jaw tightened. "Yes," she replied. The word fell heavy between them. Emotions surged through him, confusion, shock, disbelief, all bound by an overwhelming sense that something monumental had been hidden from him. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "How long have you known?" Mireya met his gaze without flinching. "From the beginning," she said quietly. Adrian swallowed hard, his pulse pounding in his ears. "They're mine?" he asked again, as though repetition might make the truth less overwhelming. Mireya nodded slowly. "Yes," she said. Kaya and Noor are your daughters." The words settled heavily between them. He looked past her toward the girls, watching them laugh softly by the fountain, unaware that their world had just expanded. His hands trembled. "How old are they?" he asked. 6, Mireya replied. 6 years, 6 birthdays missed, 6 winters and summers he never knew existed. A wave of emotion surged through him, awe mixed with grief. The realization cut deeply, not with anger, but with loss. He pressed his palms together, struggling to steady himself. "I didn't know," he said quietly. "I know," Mireya answered, and in that simple exchange lay the weight of everything unsaid. Mireya took a slow breath before speaking again. "I found out I was pregnant a few days after you left," she said. The words struck Adrian harder than anything before. He stared at her, stunned. "I didn't know," she continued quietly. "I hadn't even processed it myself yet. Everything was changing so fast." She explained how the realization came during a time already filled with uncertainty. The breakup, the distance, the pressure of starting over alone. "I kept thinking I'd tell you," she admitted. "I planned to—" Her voice wavered slightly. But then the doctors started running tests. Adrian's chest tightened. She described the appointments, the waiting rooms, the growing fear that replaced excitement. What should have been joyful had instead become fragile and frightening. By the time she finished, Adrian could barely breathe. The past he remembered so differently had continued without him, carrying consequences he never imagined. "I tried to reach you," Mireya said gently. She told him about the unanswered calls, the messages sent carefully and rewritten too many times. She explained speaking to his assistant, being told his schedule was filled for weeks. "I didn't think you were ignoring me," she added. "I knew your life had changed." Her eyes lowered briefly. "When the doctors said the pregnancy was high risk, everything became urgent. I couldn't wait for maybes." She explained how fear overtook hope. Fear of losing the babies, fear of waiting too long, fear of forcing herself into a life where she might not be welcomed anymore. "So I stopped trying," she said quietly. "Not because I didn't care, but because I had to choose stability." She looked toward the twins. They needed certainty. The silence between them deepened, not from bitterness, but from understanding that timing, not love, had shaped their separation. The weight of her words settled slowly, then all at once. Adrian felt his chest tighten as years collapsed into a single realization. While he had been building a company, a family had been growing without him. "I would have come back," he said, his voice breaking. "If I had known, I swear I would have." Regret flooded him with brutal clarity. He pictured missed moments he could never reclaim. First steps, first words, small hands reaching for comfort he wasn't there to give. His success suddenly felt meaningless. Every achievement replayed beside the cost it carried. "I should have fought harder," he whispered. "I should have made time." Mireya watched him quietly, neither accusing nor comforting. The truth hurt because it wasn't cruel. It was simply late. Adrian pressed a hand against his face, overcome by grief, not for what was lost financially, but for the life he never knew existed. Mireya spoke gently, breaking the silence. "I know you would have come back," she said. "That's why I didn't hate you." Her words softened the weight pressing between them. "I didn't keep them from you out of anger," she continued. "I did it because everything felt fragile, and I couldn't risk losing them while waiting." Adrian nodded slowly. "I built everything I thought mattered," he said, "and still felt empty." She offered a faint, understanding smile. "Sometimes life pulls people apart," she replied, "not to punish them, but to teach them what truly matters." They stood there quietly, the past no longer hidden, the present finally honest. Nothing was resolved yet, but for the first time in years, truth connected them again, not as they once were, but as two people changed by time, responsibility, and love that had never fully disappeared. After leaving the clinic, Adrian felt unsteady in a way he never had before. Boardrooms had never shaken him. Financial losses never kept him awake. But now, his thoughts refused order. Images of the twins replayed endlessly. Their faces, their voices, the familiarity he could not ignore. Sleep became difficult. When he closed his eyes, guilt surfaced. When he woke, responsibility waited. His carefully structured life suddenly felt fragile. He tried to return to routine, meetings, calls, schedules, but focus escaped him. Numbers blurred. Conversations required effort. For the first time, success felt irrelevant. He had built a future believing it was complete, only to discover an entire life existed beyond his awareness. The realization cut deeply. He wasn't angry at Mireia. He was angry at time, at distance, at himself. No matter how hard he tried to rationalize the past, one truth remained unavoidable: he was a father, and everything that once mattered now felt secondary. The shift did not go unnoticed. Celine sensed it almost immediately, the distraction in his voice, the distance in his gaze. Conversations that once flowed easily now paused awkwardly. Adrian grew quiet during dinners. His phone remained untouched. His thoughts drifted elsewhere. When she asked if something was wrong, he answered honestly but vaguely. He said he needed time. Time, however, only deepened the strain. Plans for the wedding slowed. Discussions about the future felt uncertain. The excitement that once surrounded their engagement faded quietly. Celine felt him pulling inward. It wasn't anger that separated them. It was absence. He was physically present, yet emotionally unreachable. Even when he tried to engage, something restrained him. His mind belonged elsewhere. The connection between them weakened not through conflict, but through emotional displacement, as if his heart had been redirected without his consent. The more Celine tried to bridge the gap, the clearer it became that something fundamental had changed. The conversation came late one evening. Adrian sat across from Celine, his hands folded tightly as though holding himself together. There was no way to soften what he needed to say. He told her everything. About the woman from his past, about the encounter at the clinic, about the twins. He spoke slowly, choosing truth over comfort. Celine listened in silence, her expression unreadable. When he finished, the room felt impossibly still. "You have children," she said quietly. "Yes," he replied. "I didn't know." She nodded, absorbing the weight of it. Questions followed. Not accusations, but clarity. How old were they? Did he plan to be involved? What did this mean for them? Adrian answered honestly. He couldn't pretend nothing had changed. Because it had. That night marked the moment their engagement stopped being theoretical and became real, shaped not by dreams, but by truths neither had anticipated. In the days that followed, Celine watched Adrian closely. He tried to remain attentive. He showed up. He listened. Yet something essential was missing. Not effort, but presence. His thoughts drifted often. His silence carried weight. When her name left his lips, it sounded careful rather than instinctive. She recognized the change not with anger, but clarity. His heart had shifted, not away from her out of disloyalty, but toward responsibility he could no longer ignore. The man she loved was no longer choosing between two futures. One had already claimed him. One evening, she spoke softly. "You're here," she said, "but you're not with me." Adrian didn't deny it. The truth hurt because it was gentle. He was becoming someone new, a father confronting years of absence, and that journey required emotional space he could not divide. Celine understood then that love could exist without alignment, and sometimes that was not enough. The decision unfolded quietly. There were no raised voices, no blame exchanged, just two people acknowledging what had changed beyond repair. Celine spoke first. "I love you," she said, steady but honest. "But I won't compete with a truth that needs you more than I do." Her words carried dignity, not resentment. Adrian felt the weight of her grace more deeply than anger ever could. He apologized, not out of guilt alone, but gratitude for her understanding. They discussed logistics calmly. The engagement would end. Public explanations would remain simple. There would be no spectacle. When they parted, it wasn't cold. It was painful. They embraced briefly, aware that love did not vanish. It simply no longer fit the life unfolding ahead. As Celine walked away, Adrian understood something difficult but necessary. Some endings are not failures. They are acts of respect. After the separation, Adrian stopped running from consequence. For the first time in his life, he did not search for solutions through strategy or negotiation. There was nothing to fix, only responsibility to accept. He was a father. That truth demanded more than regret. It required action. He acknowledged the years he had missed without defensiveness. He did not blame circumstance or ambition. The choices had been his, even when made unknowingly. Rather than retreat into guilt, he committed to presence. He stepped back from unnecessary obligations, reorganized his priorities, and prepared to rebuild trust patiently. There were no shortcuts. No grand gestures could reclaim lost time. Only consistency, only effort, only showing up. As he looked ahead, the path was uncertain and humbling, yet clearer than any he had walked before. For the first time, success would no longer be measured by growth or influence, but by the life he chose to be part of from that moment forward. Adrian started slowly. He didn't arrive with expectations or authority. He came quietly, respecting the rhythm Maria had built for the twins. At first, visits were short, an hour after school, a walk in the park, shared snacks at the table. He showed up consistently, every week, sometimes twice. He learned when to speak and when to simply sit nearby. The girls observed him cautiously, curious but reserved. He didn't push for affection or demand closeness. Instead, he listened. He learned their routines, their schedules, their favorite foods. He memorized pickup times and bedtime hours. Trust did not form instantly, but familiarity did. Over time, his presence stopped feeling new. The twins began expecting him, asking when he would arrive, saving drawings to show him later. Adrian understood then that love didn't begin with words. It began with reliability, and for the first time, he was exactly where he needed to be. As visits became routine, Adrian began noticing their differences. Kaya was observant and thoughtful. She liked puzzles, asked careful questions, and preferred quiet corners where she could draw. She studied people before speaking, much like he once had. Noor, by contrast, carried boundless energy. She talked constantly, laughed loudly, and moved as though the world were an adventure waiting to happen. She loved stories, music, and attention. Together, they balanced each other. Adrian found himself fascinated. He recognized familiar traits, his curiosity in Kaya, his restlessness in Noor, yet both reflected Mireya's warmth and patience. He listened to their stories about school and friends, learning their fears and joys. Each discovery brought closeness. They were not strangers anymore. They were individuals. Understanding who they were, not who he imagined, deepened his respect and softened the distance years had created. Soon, Adrian became part of their daily world. He attended school presentations, sitting quietly in folding chairs while scanning the stage for familiar faces. His chest swelled when the twins waved from the crowd. He helped with homework, learning new teaching methods and rediscovering patience. Math problems became bonding moments. Reading assignments turned into shared laughter. Evenings introduced bedtime routines. He learned how Noor needed 3 stories, never 2. How Kaya insisted on arranging her stuffed animals in perfect order. He listened to their worries whispered after lights dimmed. These moments humbled him. They were ordinary, yet priceless. No press coverage, no achievements, no recognition, just presence. Adrian realized he had missed years of simplicity, and in reclaiming it, he found peace far greater than anything success had ever offered him. Emotional closeness formed quietly, without ceremony. It appeared in small moments, when Kaya reached for his hand while crossing the street, or when Noor leaned against his shoulder during movies. These gestures were unspoken confirmations of trust. Adrian learned to listen beyond words. He noticed when Kaya grew quiet after difficult school days. He recognized Noor's laughter as comfort when insecurity crept in. He responded with patience rather than solutions. The twins began confiding in him. They asked questions about his childhood, his work, his absence, never accusing, only curious. He answered honestly, gently, without excuses. With every conversation, walls fell. For the first time, Adrian felt needed, not for what he provided, but for who he was. Their acceptance healed something deep within him. Love grew not from perfection, but from effort, shared time transforming hesitation into belonging. Fatherhood reshaped Adrian in ways success never had. He began waking earlier, not for meetings, but to make school drop-offs. His calendar shifted around recitals and parent-teacher conferences rather than board reviews. Priorities rearranged naturally. He listened more, spoke less, learned patience through repetition and responsibility. The urgency that once drove him softened, replaced by intention. Decisions were no longer measured by profit or expansion, but by impact on two small lives watching closely. He found joy in simplicity, packing lunches, fixing broken toys, answering endless questions. For the first time, leadership felt personal, not commanding teams, but guiding hearts. The pressure he once carried alone eased as purpose clarified. Fatherhood did not limit him. It grounded him. Through Kaya and Noor, Adrian discovered that success was not about building something impressive, but about becoming someone dependable. And that realization changed everything about the man he was becoming. Over time, connection deepened into something unbreakable. The twins no longer hesitated around Adrian. They greeted him with excitement, trusted his guidance, and spoke his name with ease. What began as cautious familiarity grew into certainty. He became their safe place. They shared triumphs and fears, laughter and tears. When problems arose, they looked for him instinctively. Adrian felt the shift within himself as well. The guilt that once weighed heavily softened, replaced by presence and commitment. He understood that while the past could not be rewritten, the future remained open. Their bond was not built on perfection, but consistency. Every visit, every conversation, every bedtime story strengthened it. In loving them, Adrian found belonging he never knew he lacked. And in return, Kaya and Noor gained not just a father by name, but one by choice, devotion, and heart. As Adrian became more involved in the twins' lives, communication between him and Maria increased naturally. What began as short updates about schedules and school soon expanded into longer conversations. They discussed homework progress, doctor visits, and weekend plans. Messages that were once brief became thoughtful. There was no pressure, no expectations beyond cooperation. Yet, familiarity returned quietly. They spoke more often, sometimes late in the evening after the girls had fallen asleep. Conversations drifted beyond logistics into reflections about parenting challenges and shared concerns. They laughed again, surprised by how easily it came. Years earlier, silence had separated them. Now, dialogue bridged distance. Neither revisited the past immediately. They focused on the present, on raising two children who deserved unity rather than conflict. Through communication, comfort resurfaced. They relearned each other's rhythms, boundaries, and tone. Respect replaced assumption. Patience replaced urgency. Without planning it, connection reopened, not romantic yet, but genuine. And for the first time since the clinic encounter, speaking to one another no longer felt heavy. Honesty arrived gradually. One evening, after a long discussion about the twins' school progress, silence lingered. Instead of ending the call, Mireia spoke openly. They talked about the past, not to reopen wounds but to understand them. Adrian admitted how ambition had consumed him, how he mistook progress for purpose. Mireia shared the fear she had lived with for years, raising two children while carrying unanswered questions alone. There were tears, there were pauses, but there was no blame. Each listened without interrupting, allowing truth to exist without defense. They spoke about regret without resentment, about pain without accusation, about love without expectation. For the first time, they understood each other completely, not as young dreamers, but as adults shaped by consequence. Honesty did not heal everything instantly, but it cleared space. Space for forgiveness, space for empathy, space for something new to grow, built not on fantasy, but reality faced together. Trust did not return all at once. It grew quietly through consistency. Adrian arrived when he said he would. He followed through on commitments. He stayed present even when things were inconvenient. Over time, reliability replaced uncertainty. Mireia noticed the difference. He no longer disappeared into work or delayed conversations. When issues arose, he addressed them directly rather than avoiding discomfort. His actions aligned with his words. That mattered more than apologies ever could. She allowed herself to relax gradually, not rushing closeness, not guarding every emotion. She let him participate fully in decisions, valuing his input without surrendering control. There were moments of hesitation. Old memories surfaced occasionally, reminding her how fragile trust once felt. But Adrian met those moments with patience instead of frustration. He understood that rebuilding required time he did not get to dictate. With every shared responsibility and respectful conversation, certainty strengthened. They were no longer two people divided by absence. They were partners learning, step by step, how to rely on each other again. Parenting together reshaped their connection in unexpected ways. Decisions were no longer individual. They were shared. From school choices to weekend routines, Adrian and Mireia learned how to communicate clearly, compromise respectfully, and support each other without tension. They attended school meetings side by side. They coordinated schedules. They celebrated small victories together, improved grades, confident smiles, moments of progress only parents notice. Watching Adrian interact with the twins softened Mireia's heart. She saw his patience, his effort, and the sincerity behind every choice he made for them. Adrian, in turn, gained deep respect for the woman who had carried the responsibility alone for years. He witnessed her strength not as memory, but as reality. Parenting created unity, not romance, partnership. Through late-night planning, shared concerns, and mutual pride in their daughters, a new bond formed, quieter, steadier, and rooted in purpose. They weren't revisiting who they once were. They were becoming something stronger together. Love returned without urgency or illusion. It was not the excitement of youth or the intensity of longing. It was steadier, shaped by understanding, forgiveness, and shared responsibility. They no longer loved each other for who they hoped the other would become. They loved who they were now. Conversations felt safe. Silence felt comfortable. There was no pressure to impress or prove anything. Time had refined their connection. Mistakes had humbled them. Parenthood had grounded them. When affection resurfaced, it did so gently. A smile held longer than necessary, a shared glance across the room, warmth in moments of exhaustion. Love grew not from passion alone, but from respect, from showing up daily, from choosing each other with clear eyes. This time, their relationship wasn't built on dreams waiting to come true. It was built on truth already lived, and a future shaped not by ambition, but by intention and family. The decision did not come suddenly. Adrian spent weeks evaluating what truly required his attention and what existed only out of habit. He realized that many responsibilities he once carried no longer demanded his direct presence. He began delegating authority to trusted executives. Strategic oversight replaced constant supervision. Meetings that once filled entire days were reduced to essential discussions only. It wasn't withdrawal, it was recalibration. Shareholders questioned the shift at first. Advisors expressed concern, but Adrian remained firm. For years his identity had been tied to constant availability. Now, he chose intention instead. Reducing involvement allowed him to breathe again. He no longer measured value by hours worked or emails answered. Progress continued without his constant control, proving that leadership did not require sacrifice of self. Stepping back felt unfamiliar, almost uncomfortable. Yet with each adjustment, clarity deepened. He wasn't abandoning his company. He was reclaiming his life. Adrian's withdrawal from daily operations became noticeable. He no longer attended every briefing or reviewed every minor decision. His role shifted toward mentorship rather than management. Weekly summaries replaced constant check-ins. The office that once defined his routine became a place he visited intentionally, not reflexively. Mornings changed. Instead of rushing through early calls, he shared breakfast with his daughters. Instead of ending nights with spreadsheets, he ended them with conversations and calm. His absence from daily leadership did not weaken the company. It strengthened it. Teams grew more confident. Executives stepped into ownership. Systems he built finally operated independently. For the first time, Adrian experienced freedom without chaos. Letting go was difficult. Ambition doesn't fade easily, but peace followed acceptance. He learned that stepping away didn't mean losing relevance. It meant trusting what he had created. And as corporate urgency loosened its grip, space opened for something far more valuable than control: presence. For the first time in his life, Adrian began measuring success differently. Profit margins still mattered, but they no longer guided every decision. When opportunities conflicted with family time, he chose absence from meetings rather than absence from his children. He declined expansions that demanded constant travel. He postponed deals that required relentless availability, not because they lacked value, but because time now held greater worth. He attended school events without checking his phone. He listened fully during conversations. He learned to be present without distraction. Money continued to grow quietly in the background, but it no longer dictated his identity. Adrian realized something profound. Wealth could be recovered, multiplied, or replaced, but moments could not. The laughter of his daughters at dinner mattered more than quarterly projections. A simple walk after sunset outweighed recognition. Presence became his new investment. And unlike business ventures, it offered immediate returns: connection, peace, and a sense of belonging he had chased unknowingly for years. For the first time, fulfillment felt real. Life slowed in ways Adrian never expected. Mornings began with shared breakfasts and playful arguments over cereal choices. Afternoons included school pickups filled with laughter and stories about the day. Evenings were spent cooking together, sometimes poorly, always joyfully. Weekends lost their urgency. There were park visits, board games, movie nights on the couch, and unplanned conversations that stretched long past bedtime. No schedules demanded attention beyond what mattered. These routines were modest, yet they grounded him more than any luxury ever had. He found comfort in repetition, the predictability of togetherness. The absence of urgency allowed presence to flourish. Home became his favorite destination. In choosing simplicity, Adrian discovered abundance, not measured in assets or influence, but in warmth, stability, and shared moments. Family life did not shrink his world. It expanded it, filling the spaces success never reached. And in that rhythm, he finally understood what he had been building toward all along. The night was calm, wrapped in stillness. After the twins had fallen asleep, the house settled into gentle silence. Soft light spilled from the living room lamp as Maria folded laundry on the couch. Adrian stood nearby, watching her for a moment longer than usual. There was no audience, no celebration planned, only intention. He asked her to step outside with him. The backyard was quiet, touched by moonlight and distant city glow. Crickets hummed faintly, and the air felt warm against their skin. They stood side by side, comfortable in silence. Then Adrian spoke. His voice was steady, not rehearsed. He didn't reach for grandeur or perfection. He reached for honesty. This moment wasn't about reclaiming the past. It was about honoring the present. He took her hands gently, grounding himself before continuing. For the first time in his life, he wasn't chasing achievement or approval. He was choosing home. Adrian spoke slowly, choosing each word with care. He told her how success once defined him, how ambition blinded him to what truly mattered. He admitted he mistook movement for meaning and achievement for fulfillment. "I built everything I thought would make me whole," he said quietly, "and still felt empty." He explained how fatherhood reshaped him, how presence taught him more than leadership ever had, how love demanded consistency rather than sacrifice. "I'm not the man who left," he said. "I'm not chasing something anymore." He looked at her, emotion clear in his eyes. "I've learned how to stay." He spoke of humility, of learning to listen, to prioritize people over progress. He acknowledged the years she carried responsibility alone and thanked her for her strength. "I don't want to promise perfection," he continued. "Only honesty, effort and presence." This proposal was not born of longing. It was born of growth. A man no longer trying to become someone else, but finally understanding who he was meant to be. Mireia listened without interrupting. Emotion filled her eyes. Not surprise, but recognition. She saw the man before her clearly, shaped by time, loss, and responsibility. She spoke softly. "I didn't need you to come back as someone perfect," she said. "I needed you to come back present." She admitted her fears, of repeating the past, of trusting again after so much distance. But she also spoke of what she had witnessed, his consistency, his patience, his devotion to their daughters. "You didn't just say you changed," she told him. "You showed it." She reached for his hands. "I don't love the man you were," she said gently. "I love the man you are now." Tears slipped freely as relief replaced hesitation. "Yes," she whispered, not as a return to what they once had, but as a choice to build something stronger, together. Under the quiet night sky, they embraced, not rushing, not uncertain, but united by clarity earned through years of hardship and growth. The following morning felt different. The house filled with laughter as the twins rushed into the kitchen, unaware of the promise made under moonlight. Adrian knelt to their level, smiling as Mireia joined him. There was no announcement needed. The warmth between them spoke clearly. Days that followed brought gentle joy. Shared meals, quiet smiles, plans made without urgency. The family moved as one unit, no longer divided by absence or regret. Kaya and Noor sensed the shift instinctively. They noticed longer glances, softer laughter, hands finding each other without thought. Home felt complete, not because life was perfect, but because everyone belonged. Adrian understood now that fortune could never replace connection, and ambition could never substitute love. What he had lost to time was returned through choice, not as reward, but as healing. And under that roof, surrounded by the people who mattered most, Adrian finally found the success that had escaped him all along. A family built not by chance, but by courage, forgiveness, and commitment. Adrian's journey reminds us of a truth many learn too late. Success alone cannot fill the spaces meant for connection. He achieved wealth, influence, and recognition, yet none of it brought peace until love re-entered his life. Ambition built his empire, but presence built his happiness. Timing also shaped everything. Love lost was not destroyed, only delayed. Life separated people not out of cruelty, but to prepare them for who they needed to become. What arrives late can still arrive right. And above all, presence proved priceless. Not money, not power, not applause. Being there, listening, showing up, choosing people daily, created meaning no fortune could replace. Adrian didn't find fulfillment by gaining more. He found it by returning to what mattered most. Sometimes life doesn't teach through success. It teaches through absence, until we finally understand what was worth holding on to all along. Life rarely follows the order we expect. Sometimes it asks us to chase dreams before we understand their cost. Sometimes it removes what we love, so we learn how deeply we value it. And sometimes it brings people back together only after growth replaces immaturity. Adrian's story is not about wealth gained or mistakes made. It is about becoming, about learning that love cannot survive without time, honesty, and presence, about realizing that the most meaningful moments are often quiet, shared meals, bedtime stories, gentle conversations that shape a lifetime. We don't always recognize what matters while we're chasing what shines. But life is patient. It waits for us to grow. And when we finally understand, it offers a second chance. Not to relive the past, but to build a future with clarity, gratitude, and intention. Because healing isn't about going back. It's about moving forward, together. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to support the channel. Tap the like button. It helps these stories reach more people who may need them. Share in the comments what lessons stayed with you the most. Was it about love, timing, or choosing presence over pride? If you believe stories can heal, inspire, and remind us what truly matters, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss the next tale. And if this story moved you, share it with someone who might need to hear it today. Because sometimes, a single story can change how we see our lives. Thank you for watching Billionaire Tales by Owen, where ambition meets emotion and every story carries a lesson worth remembering. Until the next tale, stay present, stay kind, and never forget what truly matters.